Good evening. Craig, thanks for that kind introduction. Rick, thank you for the invitation. It's great to join all of you. I'm a little bit biased, but to have the opportunity to talk to you about the issue, the single most important issue that I think our state and maybe our country is going to face over the next 20 years, and to be with a chamber that I think is addressing this issue. So it's great to join you. What I'd like to do is take you through a bit of a presentation here. First, talk about some macro trends that we are seeing in workforce. And then I want to drill down and talk about a couple key initiatives that we have underway. And I want to challenge you all a little bit more to be engaged with this workforce issue that we're addressing here in Ohio. So first, a little bit about our office, the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation. Governor Kasich created it when he came in office. And I think for a few reasons. From a principled or philosophical perspective, he wants a couple reasons why he created the office. One, he wants companies in Ohio to thrive. And to compete in a global economy, you have to have a competitive workforce. And it is a global economy. And secondly, he wants every individual to rise to his or her God-given potential. And having a good job is a way that you can do that. Now, practically speaking, what we do and why he put our office in place is we coordinate all of the state agencies, about 13 different state agencies that touch workforce, and we're trying to get everybody going in the same direction. We work closely with the Governor's Executive Workforce Board. They set those strategies, and then we make sure everybody executes upon those different strategies. So that's the role that our office plays. You can see our mission statement here, and I highlight two words on purpose: skilled and productive. We want a skilled and productive workforce in Ohio. First, on productivity, this is kind of economics 101. When it comes to worker output, if you have more output than input, you have more profits. When you have more profits, you have more savings. When you have more savings, you have more investment, which leads to more opportunities for people. Worker productivity, increased worker productivity has increased the standard of living, not only for individuals, but for countries for the past couple hundred years. So we have to have a productive workforce. And then secondly, we have to have a skilled workforce, and I'm going to talk more about that as we move along here. First, a quick snapshot about the state of Ohio and where we are with our labor market. We have a lot of positive momentum. You can see here, since 2011, about 484,000 private sector jobs have been created. Some good momentum there. You can see that wages, income growth, we're going in the right direction. We'd all like them to grow a little faster, but we are headed in the right direction there. And then the labor pool is starting to expand. And what I mean by that is that's the number of adults who are either working or actively seeking to work. A lot of folks after the Great Recession, they went to the sidelines. They fell off the radar. And we're starting to see more and more of those people come back into the workforce, which is a really important measurement for us. So we have a lot of positive momentum in the state of Ohio around our economy. Now, I'm going to take a step back here. And when I look at workforce kind of macro trends, I think there's two big buckets. First, there's automation and technology, and then secondly, there's demographics. And I'm going to talk about demographics first. Population growth. You can see with this chart, kind of comparing the state of Ohio to the rest of the country. You can see there's been pretty flat population growth, both here in Ohio as well, across the country. You can see in the mid-'80s, Ohio is actually shrinking in population, but we've stabilized, and that's a good thing. But here's our challenge with population growth that is becoming more and more acute. When you look at the state of Ohio, from 2010 to 2015, Ohio grew by about 76,000 people, just short of a 1% or so, kind of in line with other states. The challenge with that, though, is two counties. Franklin, where Columbus is, and Delaware County, just north of Columbus, grew by 107,000 people, which means the rest of the state decreased by 30,000 people. 59 out of 88 counties went backwards in terms of population growth. You see this at the national level as well. From 2010 to 2016, the 53 largest metro areas in the country, those cities that have 1 million in population or more, they accounted for 93% of the population growth. So in certain areas that presents different challenges than others, but nonetheless we can't lose sight of kind of the population trends that we see in the country. Next, the grain of America, or the grain of Ohio. This is clearly starting to pinch certain industries with an aging workforce. One of the comments I've heard from business owners across the state is half joking, half serious. The only good thing about the Great Recession is that it deferred the retirement of baby boomers for a few years. And we're really starting to run out of time with that too. What this slide represents is kind of a visual representation of how we are going to continue to age. You can see in 2010, out of our 88 counties, only 4 counties had population of 60-year-olds and older of 25% or greater. Only 4. By 2030, the map completely flips, where there will only be 7 counties that fall under that threshold. 9 counties, a third of their population will be made up of 60-year-olds and older. So again, this aging dynamic, we can't lose sight of this, and we need to make sure we're building a deeper bench for certain industries because they're facing an aging workforce. There's a lot of talk about the skills mismatch when it comes to workforce, and that's definitely a challenge that we have. But I think a mismatch that doesn't get enough attention is kind of a geographic or spatial mismatch. And what I mean by that is kind of where the jobs are versus where the people are who need those jobs. And you can see in this map here, hopefully you can see the shading up there. This is a map, and this is not just an Ohio challenge. This is happening across the country. This analysis just came out by Brookings this past week, but I think does a good job of illustrating what I'm talking about. From 2010 to 2016, again, those 53 largest metro areas in the country, they made up 73% of the job growth in our country. And you can see here that where the counties are shaded blue, that's where there is positive job growth. Where it's red is where there is negative job growth. Now the good news is, and it's hard to see on this representation, but Ohio, we don't have a lot of red counties, which is a good thing in the sense that we have positive job growth, but concentrated in those 3 C's, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. So to bring it down to a local level to try to illustrate this point, I live in Columbus, and there is a suburb, the northeast suburb, called New Albany. It's a very affluent suburb, but they're headquartered, a lot of the spin-offs from the Limited days, Abercrombie & Fitch, Victoria's Secret. That's where their corporate headquarters are. So a lot of logistics companies put their facilities there because they wanted to be close to the corporate headquarters, and I certainly understand that. But they're constantly looking for workers. But the challenge is those individuals who make $13, $15, $17 an hour don't live in New Albany. So this is a challenge that I think more and more of our economic development folks are looking at in terms of where those facilities are, making sure there's better alignment between where the jobs are and the people are who need those jobs. This, Marlon, is my why, this slide. And I love to share this one. This is what kind of motivates me every day. Every year, the U.S. Census puts a report out around income and poverty. For individuals in our country in 2016 that had a full-time job and worked year-round, not multiple jobs, one full-time job and worked year-round, the poverty rate for those individuals is 2.4%, 2.2%. We almost eradicated poverty. Now the challenge becomes, for those individuals who didn't have a full-time job or didn't work year-round, poverty jumps to 14.7%. And then for those individuals who did not work at all, poverty jumps up to almost 31%. And there are a lot of reasons, a lot of barriers for that, be it childcare, transportation, and those are the things that we're trying to address every day. But when you hear the tagline that a job is the best anti-poverty program, it's absolutely true. So, the next big area that we have to focus on, automation and technology, and I think this is the fascinating part of my job, is to better understand what we're facing. And it's exciting, and it can also be a little unsettling. So to illustrate this, we know that automation and technology has disrupted our economy and our jobs for a couple hundred years. But this time might be different. The digital revolution might be different. And to illustrate that point, raise your hand if you have a Facebook account. A good number. A couple years ago, there was an algorithm developed, and it actually forced Facebook to change their privacy settings, that once they have 70 of your likes, so you go out and you like a picture of your dog, once they have 70 of your likes, with 90% probability they can determine your sex, your race, your sexual orientation, your religion, and your party affiliation. That's the power of data. That is the power of machine learning, which can create a lot of opportunities, a lot of new exciting opportunities, but can present a lot of challenges. So to try to illustrate that further, I'd say every PowerPoint presentation has to have a 4-quadrant, so this is your 4-quadrant for the day. But what this represents is the 4 types of work. And what I mean by that is this. Upper right-hand corner, repetitive manual task. It brings to mind the old assembly line jobs. And we know what automation has done to those. And I did a little reading about John Titus, one of your famous industrialists, when he developed the continuous steel mill, strip steel mill. That clearly changed people's jobs. It probably dislocated some people. So we know what kind of automation can do to jobs. But now think about today, the fast food industry. Wendy's is putting kiosks in their stores. KFC is actually piloting facial recognition technology in China, where they store your payment information, so you walk in, they can recognize who you are by just walking in. They know you're going to order bucket number 1, and you're going to walk up, pick up your chicken, and leave. Think about those jobs for a second. Upper left-hand corner, repetitive cognitive task. It brings to mind call center jobs. The challenge there, though, is there's the software out there now that can perform every function of a call center employee, but do it in 20 different languages. Now, where it really starts to get interesting is in those non-repetitive tasks, and that's where artificial intelligence and machine learning comes into play. Non-repetitive manual tasks, think of paralegals. Law firms are now deploying software that can basically scan legal briefs and develop a synopsis for attorneys. Think about those jobs. And the final frontier is those non-repetitive cognitive tasks. So think of surgeons. We're still better at using our hands than robots, at least for now. But even in this space, there was an algorithm developed by a team in Imperial College over in London that can detect pulmonary hypertension with greater accuracy than cardiologists. So even that space is starting to be impacted. A couple years ago, the most widely cited study that really brought this to a lot of folks' awareness was done by a couple academics at Oxford University. And they developed this very elaborate algorithm. And they looked at the 740 top occupations in our country. And they used 3 criteria. Social IQ, the ability for humans to work with each other. Human creativity, the ability for humans to come up with new solutions to problems. And autonomous manipulation, the ability for humans to pick up objects with our hands and move them around. And when they looked at the 740 top occupations in our country, they believe that 47% of them could be computerized out in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So that's an extreme part of the debate. McKinsey Consulting has done a lot of work around this where they're not so much focused on entire jobs, but individual tasks that are going to be impacted. And I think that's where there's common agreement. All of our jobs are going to be impacted by this. And please keep in mind, too, it's easy to start to sound gloomy. I'm an optimist in this. I really feel that there are going to be a lot of new jobs created by the technology that we develop. So it's not just about the dislocation, it's about the new opportunities. So that's the forces of change. Now let's talk about the velocity of change. And there's a whole bunch of statistics I could share here. The one for the educators in the room, an analysis was done that 65% of our grade school kids today will have a job that doesn't exist today. On the business side, if you look at the S&P 500, if you go back 50 years ago, the average tenure of a company on the S&P 500 was 60 years. Today it's 15. So if you run that out by 2027, 75% of the companies that will be on the S&P 500 haven't even been created yet. But now think about the knowledge economy. A few more statistics to consider. Think about Ford and GM, how long they've been around. Tesla this past year became larger based on market cap, and they've been around only a few years. Remember when everybody thought Walmart was going to wipe out small towns across America? Amazon is now twice the size. Apple is twice the size of ExxonMobil. Facebook and Google, 20 times the size of CBS. Think about how long CBS has been around. 8-year-old Airbnb has a larger market cap than 80-year-old Marriott. You can add up all the market cap of every rental car company in the world. Uber is now bigger. But here's the punchline. When you look at that knowledge economy, all those companies, they still only make up about 10% of the global GDP and only about 5% of employment. So the exciting news is our lives are only going to get better in many, many ways because of that technology. But keep in mind, the disruption is just starting. One more slide to share, because this always really hits home in Ohio with manufacturing. Brookings did this analysis where they tracked the sales of robotics across the country to see where there's a greater concentration of robotics per human being. And if you can tell there, you can see where Ohio sits. We are at the epicenter of automation. So the size of the circle represents the industry where robotics are being used. And the density of that red color, the darker red means there are more robotics than human workers. That is driven largely by Detroit, the auto industry, no surprise there. But you can see where we sit. Now good, the exciting thing about this is, as I mentioned with productivity, it can increase wages, it can increase standard of living, but it can also, automation can also create a lot of disruption as well. But you can see where Ohio sits. We are at the epicenter of automation. So, what does all this mean? Kind of a shift in paradigm when it comes to education and workforce development. On the left-hand side of the slide kind of represents what most of us probably went through. You go to school for a defined period of time, you work for a defined period of time, and then if you're lucky, you get to retire. But where I think we need to go is more of a culture of continuous learning, where a high school degree isn't going to cut it, a college degree isn't going to cut it. You're going to have to constantly reskill and upskill yourself. And the challenge that we all have, the education system and the workforce system, if the education system doesn't figure this out, the private sector already is starting to. Google, you can go to Google, you can take a series of assessments and tests, and if you pass them, they'll hire you. They don't care if you have a GED or a PhD. You look at AT&T and the work that they're doing with Udacity and the online curriculum that they're developing, they hire people based on whether or not they pass. And even their internal promotions, once you're an AT employee, is based on continually learning. So that's where we're going, is how do we develop this culture of continuous learning? So this past year, Governor Kasich, he challenged his executive workforce board to come up with some new ways, some new thoughts about how we prepare Ohioans for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And a number of those recommendations that the board came up with became policy initiatives, and I'd like to highlight just a handful of those. Collaboration. And what you're doing here at the Chamber, the collaboration, the education committee that you've put together, the pathways committee that you put together, that is the type of work that we need to see done more consistently across the state. We have pockets of excellence across the state where business leaders and education leaders and nonprofits and workforce professionals are getting in a room and working together, but not nearly enough. So something we did, we partnered with a number of state agencies. We identified 8 organizations in Ohio that are already in place and are already doing great work around this. So we developed this document for communities who are interested in greater collaboration around workforce, just trying to provide them with a roadmap of how they can bring these different groups together. You're already doing some great work, but I'd encourage you to maybe visit our website and see if there are a few more ideas that you could pick up from this. Business advisory councils. There's already been a lot of conversation about better engaging business and education. The most frustrating conversation that I have every day is when a CEO calls and a business owner calls, starts to complain, I can't find anybody, nobody knows how to do anything. And the first question I ask is, when did you pick up the phone and call Marlon and tell him what you need? When's the last time you picked up the phone and called the president of your community college and told him what you need? And more times than not, the response is, I haven't thought of that. There's nothing I can do sitting in Columbus if the business community is not getting in the room with education leaders and making sure your efforts are aligned. So, business advisory councils. School districts have been required to have business advisory councils since the mid-90s. I will tell you that has been practiced pretty unevenly across the state. Again, there's some school districts that are doing great work with their business advisory councils, but we developed a document along with the Department of Education to put some parameters around what these councils can do, how you can put them together, and what they can do. And we've also put some standards around the school districts have to report to the Department of Education in terms of what have these councils actually done over the past year. So this is an opportunity. This is a challenge to the business community to roll up your sleeves, and it sounds like there's already some great work being done, some great collaboration. But this is a challenge to the business community to roll up your sleeves and get engaged with this and help be a part of the solution. A lot of talk about soft skills. Every time you talk to a business owner, they want to talk about soft skills. The kids are lazy, they stare at their phones, they don't show up on time, all those different types of things. But we've had very little recognition of soft skills. I always tell this story. I had a chance to meet with a number of superintendents over a year ago, and they were telling me about all of these very elaborate national signing days they have for their athletes. But they don't really have national signing days for the kids who are ready to go into the workforce or showing those competencies who are ready to move into the workforce. So again, we partnered with the Department of Education, put together the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal, and we tried to keep it really simple, where if you're a high school student, you're a high school senior, there's a one-page form with a list of these competencies that you see here. And that student needs to go find 3 mentors. It could be a priest, it could be a teacher, it could be a coach to basically validate that that student has those competencies. They turn it into their principal's office or their superintendent's office, and on their diploma they get an Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal, and on their transcript they get to list that. Now, what I ask of the business community is, when you have a young person come in with their resume and they show that they have an Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal, that means that young person has demonstrated those soft skill competencies everybody is talking about. So again, really ask for the business community to embrace this and be a part of this. And the final initiative I want to share with you is In-Demand Jobs Week. May 7th through 11th, 2018 has been deemed In-Demand Jobs Week. And you've seen this type of thing in the past. October, you have Manufacturing Month or Manufacturing Week. Very similar. We're in the enviable position where we have more jobs than we have people going into them right now in the state of Ohio. How can we create greater awareness for our young people and our teachers who then can articulate to their students what great jobs there are in their backyard? We're just asking communities across the state to come up with your own creative solutions, to open your doors to your business, show all the great jobs that exist. We're asking business leaders to go into the schools and tell them about the great jobs you have. Be creative, have fun with this, but I ask you to be involved May 7th through 11th with In-Demand Jobs Week. I heard it mentioned that, I think Rick said it, our young people don't know what great jobs are out there. And I say that respectfully. I drive by all these buildings in Columbus every day. I have no idea what people do in them. A lot of us have a hard time articulating what our spouse does for a living. So how can we create greater awareness of all the great jobs that we have across the state for our young people? And with that, there's our contact information. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to help. We would love to. Emily Modell, I'm joined by Emily this evening. She's the point person on In-Demand Jobs Week, and she certainly can answer any questions that you have. So with that, I greatly appreciate your time and I guess more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.